Anton Chigurh flips a quarter and tells the gas station owner to call it.
Call it.
The man doesn't know what he's calling for. We don't either. The whole room holds its breath. Patrick Bateman chases a man down a hallway and drops a chainsaw on him. One has no blood, the other has a lot. And only one of them actually makes your skin crawl. I went through every grade screen Psychopath to figure out why. The answer has 4 parts. We talk about Psychopath like they announce themselves. Thrilling, unhinged, the kind of person you'd clock in the first 30 seconds. And then Gone Girl came out and suddenly half the internet was paranoid about the person sitting across from them at dinner. Amy Dunne doesn't announce herself. She writes a diary, she bakes muffins for the neighbors, she cries for the cameras, convincingly enough that the people closest to her don't realize they've been auditioning for a role she'd already cast them in. The Joker doesn't have one. Everything about him, the makeup, the scaring, the speeches, announces what he is the moment he walks into a room. He's terrifying as a force of chaos, but nobody would accidentally marry the Joker. Somebody could accidentally marry Amy Dunne. That's a completely different category of frightening. What makes Amy's mask unsettling, it isn't just the performance. It's the architecture. She builds an alternative identity in real time, under pressure while being hunted. Every press conference, every vulnerable detail she lets slip at exactly the right moment, all of it is low-bearing. She's constructing, the lying is just the surface. Patrick Bateman has a mask, too. The suits, the business cards, the morning skincare routine he narrates like a liturgy. He performs normalcy with the same obsessive effort, but his mask is desperate. A performance for an audience that it isn't watching. The darkest joke in American Psycho is that nobody noticed. Bateman confesses in a voicemail and his lawyer calls back, asking about lunch. The world of corporate Manhattan is so cold and hollow that his violence doesn't even register. Not as real, not as significant, not as anything. He screams into a void that it isn't listening. His crimes matter to nobody, including, eventually, to us. A mask that needs an audience has seams. It depends on the audience to hold its shape. Amy's mask doesn't need anyone. That's what makes her dangerous, and it's what Bateman never understands about himself. So, the mask. First layer. And this is where a lot of psychopaths in fiction stop. Writers get the mask right and call it done. The result is a character who feels like a sophisticated con artist, a manipulative ex who escalated. Dangerous, maybe. Genuinely terrifying? No. Because a perfect social mask traces back to something human. Ambition, survival. Amy Dunne is terrifying partly because you can, eventually, follow her logic back to a recognizable wound. The characters who don't allow the need something underneath the mask with no wound to trace, a code. That's layer 2. Hannibal Lecter has a pattern. He kills the rude, serves them at dinner paired with a wine he's chosen carefully, draws cities from memory. His worldview is internally consistent in a way that almost makes sense, until you follow it to where it leads. And suddenly, you're somewhere a sane mind can't follow. That's the second ingredient, a code. A private logic that operates entirely outside the one the rest of us share. Amy Dunne is brilliant. Her plan is patient, detailed, nearly flawless, but her logic traces back to something recognizable. She was dismissed. She was rewritten into someone else's version of her. She refused to be left quietly. You can't follow the thread. Betrayal leads to rage, then it leads to this precise act of destruction. It makes a certain kind of terrible sense. Hannibal's logic leads somewhere else entirely. He kills because he found the victim aesthetically offensive. He eats them because he has standards about waste. He does it with genuine enjoyment, the way a person takes pleasure in a meal they've been looking forward to. And that pleasure, completely unashamed, completely unperturbed, is what makes him genuinely terrifying. In theory, you can explain a psychopath. The scene that makes this clear is the first Clarice interview. Hannibal doesn't just answer her questions. He finds what she's hiding, strips it back, and offers it to her like a gift. The intellectual exercise delights him. That's all. And then he goes back to his cell and draws Florence from memory and has a lovely evening. Amy wanted something. She had reasons. Hannibal simply had no reasons you can reach. The moment a character stops wanting and starts simply being, that's when the discomfort stops being situational and becomes permanent. So, the mask and the code. A psychopath who has both is generally psycho. But then Hannibal creates a specific problem. He has taste. He has preferences. He can be flattered, intrigued, engaged. Clarice does all of it and survives. There's a window. Narrow, yes, but a window. Anton Chigurh doesn't have a window, and that's layer 3. Let's go back to the gas station scene. Chigurh walks in, buys something, and before long the owner is being asked to call a coin toss. The man has no idea what he's calling for. Chigurh doesn't tell him, the film doesn't tell us, and yet we know. The way you know something is wrong in a room before you can name what it is. That whatever the owner says, the outcome was decided before he walked in. The third ingredient is control, the quiet kind. The kind that comes from being completely unnavigable. Hannibal controls a room too, but Hannibal is theatrical. He performs himself, the cultivated monster with witty conversations, which means, however uncomfortably, he can be engaged on those terms. You can appeal to his vanity, you can intrigue him. There are rules, even if they are his rules. Anton doesn't operate on rules you can access. When Llewellyn's wife sits across from him at the end and asks whether he gave his word to her husband, he says yes. And then he flips the coin. That's the system running. He doesn't get angry, he doesn't savor it, he continues. What makes Chigurh so difficult to watch it isn't the violence. You spend the entire film looking for the angle, the argument, the appeal, the thing you could possibly say to make him stop. And the film keeps demonstrating that there isn't one. His logic is so internally sealed that from the outside it's indistinguishable from randomness. And you cannot negotiate with something you cannot read. He keeps everyone permanently off balance. The chaos belongs to the people around him, not him. It's what happens when everyone in the room tries to read a system they were never given access to. So, the mask, the code, the control. A psychopath who has all three is unreadable, unengageable, operating on logic nobody can access. And Patrick Bateman, if you squint, gestures at all three. The mask, the pretend philosophy, the attempted control. He still doesn't terrify anyone. They will read as a very effective, very dangerous human being, a ruthless dictator, a crime boss who runs the room and answers to no one, scary, powerful, not quite terrifying. Because there's still something to appeal to. Even the most cold-blooded crime boss wants something. Power, loyalty, survival. Give him enough of it and the dynamic shifts. The truly terrifying psychopath doesn't allow that door to exist. What separates a dangerous person from a genuinely monstrous one is the last and greatest ingredient. Layer 4. At some point in Silence of the Lambs, you realize something about Hannibal Lecter. Everything he does, the warmth, the wit, the genuine seeming interest in Clarice, is real in the way a stage set is real. It's there, it functions, it produces the intended effect, but underneath it, there's nothing to appeal to. No wound that explains him, no buried humanity you could reach if you found the right angle. The warmth doesn't have an origin. It's a performance that runs on nothing. That's the fourth ingredient. The void, the realization that underneath the mask and the code and the control, there is simply nothing human left to bargain with. Patrick Bateman looks like he has it. All the hollow narcissism, all the emptiness. But Bateman urgently, desperately wants to be seen. He wants his crimes to matter, to register, to change something about how the world relates to him. He narrates his own violence, he confesses, he waits for a reaction that never comes. That need, the knowing, relentless need to exist in someone else's perception, is profoundly human. Bateman is a man staring into the void, terrified of what he sees. Oliver Quick looks like he might have it too. Saltburn spends most of its runtime presenting him as something genuinely unreadable, adaptive, patient, impossible to locate. And then it explains him. Envy, loneliness, class resentment, an obsession he can finally name and trace back to a specific wound. The moment he becomes legible, the sense that he is something truly other collapses completely. Pearl is the clearest example of this. The film opens her psyche completely. Her loneliness, her repression, her fantasies, her desperation. Her final monologue is horrifying precisely because it's so human. She's emotional, exists with nowhere to go. Understanding Pearl makes her tragic. Understanding Hannibal changes nothing. That's the gap. All three of them, Bateman, Oliver, Pearl, are intelligent, capable of real damage, genuinely unsettling. The difference is legibility. You can find them, you can trace them back, and the moment you can, the void closes. Hannibal doesn't need acknowledgement. He doesn't require an audience. He operates the same way in his cell alone as he does in a crowded room. His humanity is gone, fully, genuinely absent. The end of The Silence of the Lambs gets this exactly right. Hannibal calls Clarice, wishes her well, and mentions he's having an old friend for dinner. He sounds warm, delighted even, like someone who means it. That warmth and the fact that it means nothing is the horror. Because when a character has the void underneath, there's no move left. Appealing to their humanity won't work, and the humanity like that is a prop. Tracing the trauma backwards leads nowhere. Because there is no trauma, only a decision they made about what they were. And a character with a true void wants nothing a human being can give them. Patrick Bateman wanted to be noticed. That's the most human thing about him. And it's why, for all the blood and the business cards and the infamous morning routine, he never actually terrifies anyone. Cruelty needs something to be directed at. The void is the permanent absence of anything cruelty could want. The question I keep coming back to is whether any film made in the last 10 years has actually pulled off all 4 layers at once. If you think one has, leave it below. I'm genuinely curious. And remember, you can always check my YouTube channel to see more deep dives about films. I'll see you in the next one.